Today, we're going to be talking about something profound, something that will transform your fundraising game entirely. If you've been the one who's been begging donors, who've been over explaining, who've been, trying to convince donors to give to you, this is what will change your fundraising game for good. Because the truth is, you don't have to beg, you don't have to convince, you don't have to over explain. You only need a process that helps these donors see the value your organization provides and get them to fund you successfully. If you're joining me for the first time, my name is Rooney. I've been within the nonprofit world and the fundraising space for so many years, and we've done good numbers in terms of raising money. And we've worked with fundraisers across the country to raise money and transform their organization. So today, I want to walk you through what successful fundraising looks like. Because you see, fundraising and funding is the lifeline of any nonprofit organization. And if you're struggling with any of the both, you are most likely not going to have a successful mission. So what we're going to talk about today is to how you're going to get successfully funded, how you can raise 6 to 7 figures over the next 12 months. Because without you understanding this core concept, how to get donors and funders to say yes every time, you're most likely going to keep struggling and struggling. Now, if you've been following me for some time, you've always heard me talk about ideal donors, ideal funders, right? That's the framework and that's the foundation upon which successful fundraising is built. If you go into fundraising thinking you can't convince everyone, you can't be able to explain everyone into giving to you are most likely going to struggle. But if you're able to identify who your ideal funders are, who the people who already have a reason to give to your organization are, if you're able to identify who the people who have the propensity, the affinity, and the capacity to give to your nonprofit, that's the foundation. Because when you talk to these people, it's no longer about begging, it's about inviting them in for a partnership. So if you don't know who your ideal funders are, I'll ask that you go over to my last videos, the videos I did over last week, where I really explained who the ideal funders are to help you understand who these people are. For today, I'm going to be talking about how to get them to say yes every time you reach out to them. And I'm going to take you through the step-by-step process so that you know how to do this thing, so that you know how to become the founder that can raise money for your organization successfully. Now, let's go into the step-by-step process. The very first step of the process is getting them to know you. Now, before I even go into the process, I want you to understand that before any funder or any donor will give to your organization, you need to build what we call the know, like, and trust factor. Because before anybody will give to your organization, they are going to first of all know you, they are going to have to first of all like you, they are going to need to trust you before they even give to your organization. So your fundraising process, your engagement process must follow this reading, getting people to know, like, and trust you before you make the ask. The mistake most founders or most nonprofits make is that they reach out with their hands out. You're reaching out to the first or someone for the first time, but you're already asking for money. You know this. It's going to turn you off. Imagine your friend who hasn't even reached out to you for a long time is reaching out to you and then is asking for money. You'll probably not even listen to them. And that's a friend. Talk more of somebody you don't even know or you've never heard of before. So you see, for somebody to give to you, there has to be that know, like, and trust factor. There has to be that relationship because you can only withdraw from a relationship you're already invested into. So if you're trying to raise money from people you have no relationship with, you haven't invested any sort of, any form into that relationship, you're most likely going to get a no. So the very first step of the process is getting them to know you. How do you get them to know you? A simple email explaining who you are, what your organization does, and the alignments between your mission is a fine way to get them to know you. A direct call in to say, this is who I am, this is what we do, this is how we're aligned, is also a fine way to get them to know you. But as a strategic fundraiser, right, we go beyond just getting them to know you on that first touch. We also want to be able to provide them value because people value people who are valuable. If you want people to value you, you must be able to show that you are a person of value. So when you're going out for that first touch, there has to be a communication of value as well. And what kind of communication of value? You could reach out, explain who you are, what you do, what your organization does, and then provide them some ideas that can help their business, that can help, their philanthropy, that can help them in their own personal life. That's one fine way to establish that you're a valuable person people should listen to. But aside providing them ideas, you could also provide them a template of your program, a template of how you create transformation. You could also provide them a very striking statistics that shows the need you're working around. You want to be able to provide these people some sort of value that separates you from the others who are reaching out to raise money, or who are reaching out to ask for money for the very first time they are reaching out. So that's how you start the process. Aside getting them to know you at the first point, you also want to establish value, and you establish value by providing them ideas. You establish value by providing them striking statistics. You establish value by providing them value around whatever areas that you think is going to be valuable for them, whether it's their personal life, their business, their profession. Whatever sort of value you can provide, it's very important you provide that at the very first touch, because you want to do what? Establish your value at the very first touch. The second step of the process is now to get them to like you. And how do you get people to like you? A lot of people will say, provide them more value. But when it comes to my own strategic approach, I'll say go in and ask for advice. Go in and ask for feedback. Go in and ask for ideas, because this is how it works. When you ask people genuinely for something that do not cost them to give to you, right? People tend to build bond with you, thinking they are helping you. By feeling like they are helping you, that tends to help them trust you. They get them to like you, because when they help you in some way, they feel, yes, I've done favors to this person, and this person must now be close to me. But the concept is, instead of going to provide more value, at that point, you're asking for ideas. You're letting them know, this is a program we're working on and we'll like your ideas. Well, how do you think we can be able to impact this audience more? How do you think we can be able to create more of this transformation? How do you think we can be able to position our organization to be able to create more results? You want to ask for ideas on that second touch. You're not asking or providing more value so that you don't start to look like a perv, right? You don't want to be one who's trying to force yourself on them. So the second touch has to be you asking back for ideas, for feedback, for anything they can be able to provide you, not money. Very important you know that the second step of the process is not you asking for money. It's you asking for ideas, because people tend to be attracted to people they can't help, especially when you're not coming off asking for money. And also, it's quite reciprocal, right? When you give something at the first touch and you ask for something in return in the second touch, people tend to reciprocate that, because now they see you as one who's providing them some value, and of course they can provide you some value in return. By getting them to provide you some value in return, I'll tell you this, they will like you, because that's the goal. Of course, there are other ways you can get them to like you, but I will always say go in, ask for advice. People like to give advice, and there's something a successful fundraiser I worked with always say. He say, if you ask for money, you get a no, but if you ask for advice, you get money twice. So go in, ask for advice on the second touch. That will cement your relationship. The third part of the process is you getting them to trust you. How do you get them to trust you? Now they provided you some advice. The third step would then be for you to acknowledge that advice and then let them know it was valuable to your organization. So, for example, if you're asking a question on how can we better impact these children, and then they give you an advice on this is how we think you can better impact these children, you want to go in the third step to complement and acknowledge that advice, saying, we got what you said, we put it into practice, this was the result, or we got what you said, we put it back into our organization, we had a meeting about it, and it was really wonderful, we're grateful for that sort of advice. You want to acknowledge that advice and then invite them in for some form of partnership. Very important. You are still not asking for money yet, because I know the way you're already tuned in is because you're already tuned into going in to ask for money, but don't do it. You can't ask for money either on the fourth reach or the fifth reach. The first reach, like I said, is to get them to know you and you to provide them some form of ideas. The second reach is for you to ask for advice, ask for ideas, ask for feedback. The third reach is for you to acknowledge that feedback and then ask for partnership. Now you advised us as regards improving the lives of our kids. We've been able to acknowledge that advice. We put it into practice. We discussed about it. We rephrased our program so that we can be able to do it. You acknowledge then that advice was valuable to your organization, and then you are now inviting them in where we have a program that's coming up on the 2nd of this month. We would love to have you join us. Just come be a co-facilitator. Just come be part of the program. Just come, show yourself. Whatever way you want to be able to invite them in, you invite them in. Getting them to come in will help them now see the organization from a very personal point of view. Because when they come in and join one of your programs, they join one of your events, they now get to see really what your organization is all about and the kind of transformation you are creating. This is really very important. So like I said, the third step is for you to acknowledge that advice and then invite them in for some form of partnership. You could invite them in for an event. You could invite them in for a program. You could invite them in to even co-develop something with you, co-develop a material, co-develop a curriculum, co-develop, you have to be able to get them to come in. And that's where they build the trust. So like I said, before you can make the ask, they need to know, like, and trust you. For them to know you, you introduce yourself and give them some ideas, showing that you're a valuable person. For them to trust you, you need to ask for them to like you, you need to ask for advice, ask for feedback. And then for them to trust you, you need to be able to acknowledge their advice and invite them in to co-facilitate something together. And then the fourth step, you can now go in with your proposal. You can now go in with your fundraising appeal. This is a four-step process that's going to get donors to say yes to you every time if you follow the process, especially wealthy donors, because these are the people who really value organizations that know what they are doing. So if you want to be funded, this is the very process. You go in at the end with your proposal, with your fundraising appeal, with calling to make the ask. And at that point, it's going to be so natural. It's going to be so straightforward because now you've established value. They now know you, they now like you, and they now trust you. This is the sequence every of your fundraising process has to follow if you want to raise money successfully for your organization. Reaching out with your hands out, reaching out with the very first message saying, we need $100, we need $50, we need $1 million is always going to get you a no. But when you reach out to get them to know, like, and trust you, you are most likely going to get a yes. And even when you do not get a yes on the final ask, which is the fourth step, we also have a follow-up process because the truth is 70%, 50% of these people would not still give to you even after the fourth step. But when you follow up, that's where the money is. You need to be able to follow up. Now you didn't get a yes. That does not mean you're turning back or you're abandoning the relationship. Because the moment you do that, you've proven to the funder or the donor that you are in for a transactional relationship. But when you go back in and then provide them more value, provide them a striking statistics, provide them updates on your program, provide them more value, right? And then you go back in to make the ask, you're most likely going to get a yes. And something I also learned recently, even when somebody gives you a no, it does not mean that it has to end there. You can also get them to recommend 3 people from within their network that you can reach out to. That is you turning a no into a yes. Aside asking them for 3 people from their network, like I said, follow up. Send them more tracking statistics, send them more information, send them updates on your programs, send them more transformation you're working on, and then make the ask again. Some people are so negative that you need to have to ask, over and over again for you to get a yes. So if they are a valuable donor, if there are people who you think can be very valuable to your organization, do not abandon that relationship you started to build. Follow up, and follow up. And for those who give, you must always steward your donors. Send an automated thank you email in, send a handwritten thank you email in, have your board members call these donors, send them update of the transformation you're creating, send them update on what you use their resources to do. You are building a more quality relationship that will keep paying over and over again. So the fundraising doesn't stop in the very fourth, the fourth step process that we talked about, getting them to know, like, and trust you. Even when you get them to know, trust, like, and trust you, and you make the ask and you don't get the donation, you must be able to follow up. And aside following up, you must also be able to, steward those who have given. This is how you get donors to say yes every time. Fundraising is like mathematics. One plus one is always two. If you see fundraising as difficult, it's going to be difficult for you. If you see fundraising as a transactional relationship, you're always going to get no. But if you go into fundraising with the view of building a quality relationship, you're going to get yes, and you're going to get a relationship that keeps paying and keeps impacting years and years again. So tomorrow, I'm going to be on here to talk more on how to raise money, more on how to transform your organization, and more on how to build the organization you've always dreamt of. Stay put, follow, like. We want to keep seeing you, and we want to keep providing you value so that you can create the organization of your dream, so that your fundraising outreach can always be successful. I'll see you tomorrow.